Hi, everyone. I'm Aaron Henney, Artistic Director of Theater Dybbuk, and it's great to be with you. For those who have been with us in the past, welcome back. And for those just joining us for the first time, so glad you are here. As many of you know, over the past 2 to 3 months, we've been doing, every Friday, we've been doing online engagement, either chats with the artistic director about theatrical process and topics, or training opportunities with artistic associates. And we decided to try something new. We wanted to have conversations with theater Dybbuk artists about their process and their ways of working and what it's like to work with us and in other places. And so this week we'll be talking with stage manager Danny Crisp, and we're really thrilled to have you with us. And actually, I'm going to start again because sometimes people join the stream late. So if you've just heard this, enjoy it like it's the first time. I'm Aaron Henney, Artistic Director of Theater Dybbuk. This week, I'll be in conversation with stage manager and theater Dybbuk artist Danny Crisp, talking about process, his way of working, and his experience. And so we're really glad to have you with us. Before we begin the chat, however, I thought it important to acknowledge the deaths of the now more than 100,000 people in America alone from COVID-19. And separately, I want to acknowledge the killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. I'd like us to take a moment of silence to acknowledge these losses. Thank you. Okay, now we'll transition to our conversation with stage manager Danny Crisp. And again, so glad you're here and thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Just so everyone knows who's watching, Danny is an artist associated with the company. He's now currently working on his third full production with us and has also worked on some other projects and readings and opportunities. Just so glad you're on the team. And while people who are watching may have some awareness, either deep or more shallow, of what a stage manager does and is, if you wouldn't mind, I think it would be helpful to hear your sort of definition and explanation of what a stage manager does.
Well, I feel like most people think of a stage manager as this crazy angel that just kind of figures things out. But I would really say that stage managing is coordinating between every department of a production and ensuring that we can smoothly recreate every moment of a production during performance. That's kind of my boilerplate concept of it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that exactly what you said, sometimes people don't fully understand that actually the job really kicks into a certain kind of high gear, right? When the show becomes the stage managers, when it's like, okay, and a lot of people don't necessarily know that the director, in most cases, then sometimes by union rules, goes away, essentially is still present, hangs out, but really the stage manager is in charge and is making sure the integrity of the show remains intact and the original intention. So I think that's really good for people to understand, and that's in a variety of ways, from giving notes, that staging has changed, watch out for that, to making sure that all the cues are being called at the right times and happening in the ways, and also just managing personalities and needs as we go along, and you're really good at that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think also I just want to pause and say, Julie Lockhart, our marketing director, is here on the side. And as many of you know, she's also my spouse, so we are quarantined together. And she is keeping an eye on comments and questions. So if you have any for me or for Danny about process, about what stage management is, about Danny, please feel free to chime in, and we'll do our best to answer those comments and questions as they come in. So Danny, tell us a little bit about you, your history, your way of coming to stage management. Just, would love to hear a little bit.
Sure. I grew up acting and singing in youth productions. When you're a kid, you only see actors and sometimes directors, so you have this idea that those are the only jobs that are available to you. And so I started doing that, and kind of as I grew up, I realized acting is really not for me. It's not my life. It's great. I love actors. I have so much respect for them, and I personally don't want to do it. And I started looking into directing in college. I started looking at designing in college, and I eventually landed on stage managing, just because it's really the only job that lets you put your finger on the pulse of every single department.
Hmm.
I get to have in-depth conversations with lighting designers. I get to talk very closely with the costume designers. I get to work with these great directors. I get to work with actors, and I really get to kind of be a part of every single part of a process. And I think if you're a person that just really loves the art of creating theater, it's a great place to be because you see everything.
I love it. It's so interesting. I think there's my experience, and I think a lot of theater artists who work in a variety of forms, right, that when we begin, especially as kids, it's often I'm acting, right, or I'm on stage, or I'm envisioning myself in the role that I see most directly influencing what's on stage because of the nature of what we're learning and how we're working. And that transition, I remember when I transitioned to really identifying as a playwright, which for a lot of my career, that was my primary, where I was like, you mean I don't have to be on stage and memorize lines and have all that, right? But still get to hold a vision and see everything. So I hear that I love the idea that a stage manager is fundamentally, in every part of the production, and that brings real joy. And so, okay, along those lines, you work in both theater and dance a lot, and in hybrid forms, obviously, the things that ride the line between those different disciplines. And I think it would be great for people to understand, for you as a stage manager, like, where is it like there's no difference and here's how it's all the same, and then where are there differences that you notice in process and stage managing for those forms?
Yes, I work in dance a lot. I work very often with LA Contemporary Dance Company. I've done several shows with them, and we've gone to New Zealand. We've done a lot of really exciting things. And I'm also the resident stage manager for dance at the American Musical and Dramatic Academy with AMDA over in Hollywood. I've been there for about almost 8 years now. And dance really is kind of a different beast. There's a lot of things that you assume when you're trained within theater, as I was, that you just kind of have to unlearn and do differently. I don't take blocking notes the same way that I do. I have to lean on my choreographer a lot more and a lot differently than I do with a director, because it's a different language that I haven't been trained in. I can't tell an actor, that they're perfectly creating this dance line. I don't know it. I can know what it's called, and I can know that it's happening, but I really have to develop a very specific relationship with a choreographer where they teach me a lot of things that I didn't know before.
Right.
But it all, no matter what though, you're telling a story, and it's all just a matter of how close or how different that story and that reality that you're creating is to the world that's outside. So we still do all the same theatrical conventions. I still get to work with every designer. We still get to create a world, which is wonderful. Where it gets different are kind of in the nuts and bolts. Where I don't get to create a production binder in the same way, where I have a script and I write, light cue 12 goes here, sound cue 47 goes here. I have to create a lot of charts, and I have to create draw a lot of pictures, and there's a lot more rehearsal footage. So as opposed to reading the script and going through and checking all of my notes in order to call all of the technical cues for a show, I find myself with my iPad or my laptop over here, and I'm watching rehearsal footage of the show, and I've got all of my notes over here where I describe when things happen, and then I have to just kind of practice calling the show back and forth and keep doing that on my own, so that I can basically call the show from memory by the time an audience is there, and I have to learn large chunks of choreography in order to make that happen.
Right. It hadn't occurred to me, of course, right, that your original language was theater, so the understanding of that, and also the ways that I often think about cueing, right, which is, okay, this line is here, so now I can put this cue in the script. But without that, yes, you have music and you have other cues, but really that constant toggle between the looking at the footage and also, as you said, I hadn't fully processed this till right now, that you can watch kind of more naturalistic staging and know, hey, you didn't cross to the left on that line like you're supposed to. But you're not a choreographer, so knowing like your leg is supposed to be straighter at this moment is a more challenge, is a different kind of challenge. And so that's really interesting. And so I'm curious, I'm going to follow up on what you said, which is, if you're noticing that choreography seems to have shifted a little bit, but not in an overt way, in a more subtle way, but you're registering it, how do you handle that since you're not a choreographer? Do you handle it in the same way you would with actors? Like, hey, you're not quite doing the choreography, or do you kind of hand it over to the choreographer, as you were saying? What's your approach?
Well, there's a little bit of a hybrid. The concept is still the same. By the time we're in performance, I may not be a choreographer, and I am definitely not a dancer, but I have seen the movement 200-300 times at this point. So I'm very familiar with it and what it usually looks like. And so I may not be able to provide a dancer all of the specifics as to, you're utilizing this muscle as opposed to this one, the way a choreographer would, but I can call attention to the fact that it doesn't look the same, or that I'm seeing them make an error or a new choice that I saw them make in rehearsal at one point and a choreographer corrected them on. So if it's a smaller thing, I can have that conversation with dancers. If it's a little bit larger, I tend to lean on my dance captains in larger shows, where I will ask them, hey, have you looked at this section, because it feels like we're not communicating the same thing.
Interesting. So there's a certain delegation that happens. So, okay. So now I'm curious about, all right, so Theater Dybbuk's work, which again, you're working on your third full production with us and have done other projects as well, really is kind of hybrid work, right? Where it's text-based, but has a lot of choreography and choreographed movement and kind of precise alignment of the two at times. So I'm and also has many other things going on, that it's talking about thematically. So I'm curious, for you as a stage manager, what's the experience that's either unique or a lot like other work of working with us, and what does that look like to you?
I tend to treat most of Theater Dybbuk, if I think of it as a dance production, then the parts that are more theatrically based just feel easier for me, as opposed to being like, oh, this is theater, it's going to be nothing. And then there's those dance sequences where I really have to realize I have to pay more attention to. Yeah. But the choreographers that you bring in have all been really good about being very specific about what they want. And I also find that since you work with actors who are movers, I speak a more similar language with those performers than I do sometimes with trained ballet and contemporary dancers that I work with, where we can have more in-depth discussions of, when we talked about this in rehearsal, this movement that you were creating this emotion, and I feel like we're losing the arc of the scene because of that. And that tends to be those actors weigh in, as opposed to, it's 12 steps this way, a 90-degree turn this way. You'd have to navigate that emotional arc. Right. Which, especially in longer runs, is where I find sometimes an actor will kind of jump over a few steps to get to their desired product. I find that the emotional work, more often than the physical work, is where they kind of start getting used to doing it, and they don't do all the steps.
Interesting. So I hear that when you can regard this as being closer to a dance experience, where the focus is on some of the technical aspects and how they marry with those emotional aspects. That's really interesting. I have to tell an anecdote that's one of my favorite anecdotes. First show you did with us, Lost Tribes. I have this remarkable moment. I just have to tell everybody what a skilled stage manager Danny is. Do you know the moment I'm going to refer to?
I'm not sure. There were a few really fun ones.
So one of our performers had left a prop behind. It happens. And it was a prop that needed to be used throughout the play. That was throughout the performance. All the performers had ropes that they were using in like half the choreography in the piece, and it was a rope that was missing. And I have this distinct memory of you grabbing the rope and walking past the stage like you were going to the restroom or getting something from back, and just like dropped the rope on stage. No one even saw it. It was the most remarkable. And I remember the actor going, oh, there it is, and picking it up. So I needed to give a fun shout out to that moment, because it's really like your and I think this is super important for stage managers, you need to be the calm in the storm, right? And that's the calm in the storm. Like, things will go wrong. It is live theater, and we need that person who's holding the center, and you definitely do that really well. So my question along those lines is, okay, so we heard about the stuff you love about stage management, that, you know, your hands are in different areas, and you get to touch kind of all areas of the shows. What would you say? There's all kinds of challenges, but if you had to choose one or two that you were like, I find this can be challenging, or this is challenging for me as a stage manager, what might that be?
I think the challenge for most stage managers that I talk with is in creating and fostering a supportive and positive work environment, while also holding a boundary with all of your cast, so that everybody doesn't get so comfortable that, you know, we're family, and then we get to really just plow past professional work environments.
Right.
So there's always a duality in that you love and respect everyone that you work with, and you understand that everyone is being very vulnerable and bringing some their innermost instincts to the stage, and it's a highly vulnerable situation.
Yeah.
And understanding that because it's a highly vulnerable situation, everyone around them also needs to treat them professionally and with respect. So moving that back and forth can always kind of be challenging in a highly stressful situation where you don't necessarily have a lot of time to explain why you need to do something.
Yeah, I hear that, like needing to allow for keep people feeling respected and in community, while also recognizing there is a time sensitive job to be done, and we want to be sensitive, but can't be in constant navigation, right? Or the navigation is constant. That's sort of the point. So I think thanks. I hear that as a challenge. I hear that as a challenge as a director too. You know, there's some similar and overlapping opportunities and challenges. So speaking of challenge, online right now, we are live theater animals. We do things, generally in person and together, and now things are happening in an online format that we can have a debate about whether it's theater, whether it's not. But I know you are doing one or two projects that have online components and such, and I just love to hear about what's happening there, what challenges and what new ways of operating, and kind of what's that experience like?
Yes. COVID-19 has really stopped the live entertainment, theater, film, television industry as we know it. And, we're waiting for the tools to be able to gather safely. But at the same time, we can't just kind of wait in what I like to call purgatory for those parameters to be lifted. So right now, with the college that I work with, we're actually rehearsing a dance show completely online. We had our first week of rehearsals before this started, and we had to make a decision whether we were going to cancel or continue working. And so I've been able to work with a team. We've been able to keep artists on the paycheck and having money come out to our local artists, in which they record large videos of teaching choreography, and we found a hosting website and an online shared folder where they send that material in. Our dancers are working on that, and they upload the footage doing them, and the choreographers provide notes, and it's a lot more liaisoning back and forth, but people are able to still continue training and still continue working while we're apart. And then the hope is that as soon as we're able to gather back together, the hope is that this will be one of the first productions in the area to come back to actually premiere, since we have been able to continue our work.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like some of the challenges and opportunities are like, we're trying to stay connected, and a lot of your job has become as much about managing as about connecting people and kind of managing the communication across departments, which actually isn't that different than what happens in person. It's just a kind of evolved form of it.
Yes, at its heart, it's the same thing. I mean, we're a group of disparate people that come together and want to tell a story together. So we're still doing that. We're just now navigating time zones and internet connections and a few things that, you know, we didn't have to deal with before. But if we treat it like an opportunity and remind ourselves to honor the frustration and then treat it like a new adventure and laugh at the struggles, we can still continue to develop a new way of working and a new tool in our bag that may or may not be something that we continue working with after we can meet together again.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it, that we're learning a lot in this moment about additional opportunities to how we work, right? At the moment, it's alternative, but it might become additional. And I think that's an interesting way to think about it. A couple last things in these last 5 minutes-ish. One is I just want to remind people, especially those who may just be maybe popping up in their feed and seeing us. I'm Aaron Henney, Artistic Director of Theater Dybbuk. I'm here with stage manager and Theater Dybbuk artist Danny Crisp. And again, in these last few minutes, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in and we'll do our best to answer them. But I will kind of continue. And, Theater Dybbuk's work is often dealing with complex questions of identity and of justice in our world, and being able to hold multiple narratives and topics related to those things. And I know that those questions are on your mind. We've talked about some of these things, and so I'd actually love to just transition on kind of a personal, professional level. As a gay man working in theater, I know that this week Larry Kramer, activist, playwright, really important figure, an instrumental figure, died. And I just, I'd love to hear from you just your own reflection on this moment and his legacy and your own work in theater and around questions of equity and justice, and anything coming up for you around that.
Definitely. Larry taught me a lot about queer identity and queer politics. I was born in 1983, which is kind of right as the AIDS epidemic was going from a somewhat small experience for a lot of Americans and exploding into all of Americans' consciousness. So as I was just starting to figure out my own identity and what that means, I was surrounded with images of men dying from an unknown disease, and then from a known disease that no one was helping. And the first kind of person that I saw that was really working on that was the most visible was Larry Kramer. And I really admired how his dogged determination to take care of his own. I'm part of the first gay generation post-plague. And I just always kind of I always acknowledge that, we've lost so many people that would have been our teachers. They would have been our mentors. They could have been our friends. And so what I've inherited from that is just kind of this sense of loss and a responsibility to be that for the next group of people that come up. And Larry was so lucky that he was able to live to, I think it was 83 or 84. And which allowed so many more people to be aware of his legacy. And it's beautiful. And I'm grateful to be part of that history and to keep pushing it forward.
Thanks. So that leads me to a last question to close out with. And I think you've given us also a good charge in general to think about kind of what are our responsibilities as artists, and this platform we have to think about our direct community, as well as communities that we may or may not identify as belonging to, but that are marginalized and are maybe not seen, and what are our responsibilities in telling stories and in listening to stories and not just telling them, and letting that inform our work as well. So you work with, so I'm going to close out with this along those lines, because you talked about your own responsibility in light of that as a mentor and such. You work with students, you work not just with professionals, you work with professionals in training. And I think it's sort of a two-part question. You can go whatever way you want with it. One is, what's that like? How is that the same or different than working with professionals? And then along those lines, like, what do you feel is the responsibility to them? What is the, like, if nothing else, I want them to take this. And so, yeah.
I love working with students. It's when I first started working, I don't have a degree in theater. I started working at that in school and kind of meandered a little bit. So when I first started working, I kind of had to figure it out on my own, and then just kind of every time that I messed up or got yelled at, or kind of figure it out as I went, and then just keep working on larger and larger shows. And if I can really teach my students what to expect from a professional, from a safe, supportive production team, and what they're expected to bring to the table as well, then I think I've done my job. I want I want this next generation of artists to come out knowing, just on a basic level, what they need to bring to the table, and also what they need to expect back, and how to safely do that with each other. And that goes for all elements of theater, being vulnerable within acting, within intimacy choreography, within safe backstage procedures, and knowing how to navigate difficult situations, and give them the opportunity to make mistakes as they do those navigations. Let them make those mistakes in school, so that they can come out fully aware of how to handle themselves.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it gets me thinking about how something you said in your answer just now really resonated with me, this idea of how to show up for the responsibilities, but also kind of know what the boundaries are, right? Especially as right now we're really thinking about the ways that, and you talked about intimacy choreography, and the ways that our growing awareness of needing to heighten our sensitivity to people's boundaries, and also to be able to say, you have a right to say no, or this doesn't work for me, while at the same time needing to show up fully for the work, and the tension in that. And I think that your students are really lucky to have a teacher who has that balancing act in mind, because not everybody does. So such a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks to those who joined us. And Danny, always so great to work with you, and I look forward to more work together in the months and years to come. And thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Sure. And to everyone else who is here, thank you. We'll be back next week with other opportunities, which you'll find out as the week comes on. And take care, and everyone stay safe and as healthy as possible at this time. Bye-bye. Bye, Danny.